Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm John Barron. Coming up, the tobacco industry declares war on government plans for plain packaging. The haggling continues over what is a fair price for carbon, and the Donald decides to keep his day job. Our panel tonight, Tom Switzer from the US Studies Centre, broadcaster and academic Waleed Aly, and in Melbourne, Chris Berg from the Institute of Public Affairs. The tobacco industry has taken the gloves off in the fight against the federal government over plain packaging. British American Tobacco Australia says the plan to remove branding will lead to an increase in smuggling and smoking. It's threatening to cut the price of cigarettes to stay competitive.
We are very competitive, and we will obviously focus on pricing, given it's the only thing really left to focus and differentiate brands. But more importantly, the real driver will be illegal tobacco. And illegal tobacco is smuggled tobacco, it's counterfeit tobacco, it's contraband tobacco. About 1 in 5 cigarettes is illegal today, brought in by smugglers, underworld triads, and the underbelly of the world. Okay? It means we lose about $1.1 billion of government excise every year.
But the federal government says it won't be swayed by an act of desperation. And Treasurer Wayne Swan has also taken a swipe at the coalition's stance on the issue too.
Self-interested posing from the tobacco companies who haven't played a great role in Australia and have been very big supporters of the Liberal Party with donations. So we're running into a bit of political flack in terms of our plain packaging initiatives, but it's about saving lives. They're about looking after themselves.
Now, Tom Switzer, you used to work for the Liberal Party, among the many and varied things you've done over your career. Are they compromised on this? Because Tony Abbott so far is sitting on the fence and they do take money from the tobacco industry.
Sure, well, I mean, compromise and being in compromising positions is the heart and soul of politics, and I suspect that you can make the argument that Tony Abbott and the coalition are as compromised, no more so than, say, the unions are when the government or a Labor Party determines its industrial relations policy, or indeed the Greens when they receive backing from renewable energy companies when they make decisions on climate change. I mean, this is the heart and soul of politics. But what you're seeing here, of course, is the marketplace at work, and I don't think we should be surprised that the tobacco industry today has come out swinging. Of course it will cut prices to stay competitive in a market where you have plain packaging.
And yet what the tobacco industry is talking about is almost amounts to blackmail. They're saying, well, if the only way we can compete is by cutting our prices, we will cut our prices and more kids are going to smoke as a result.
Well, who knows if they're bluffing? It could be just a sales pitch, but it could be genuine. I mean, the unintended consequences of the government's regulations are not clear yet. If the tobacco industry is right, and there is this flooded market, illegal market of tobacco, then of course they have no alternative but to cut prices. And their counter argument to the government would be that more and more children will be smoking. I don't think that should be dismissed easily, by the way. But the bottom line here is that when the government starts imposing these kind of regulations and starts fiddling with these sensitive issues for business, and this is a business, it's a perfectly legitimate business, it has every right to play this game.
Waleed Aly, what's your view on this? Because we talked about sort of compromises that are made in politics. Is the government also compromised? After all, they're taking money from the tobacco industry in the form of taxes and excise.
Well, yeah, but, I think that they're not compromised in the way that the coalition clearly is. I mean, it's clear that the coalition understands this is an issue that's going to rate well with the public, and there are polls demonstrating that they're quite supportive of this measure, because, it looks good to get tough on tobacco for a start, but the coalition doesn't want to alienate an element of its support base, big business. But the messages here are just so confused. I mean, Tom's spoken about unintended consequences, but the nub of this issue here is actually the intended consequences that I think the tobacco industry are pretty confident will ensue, and that is that they won't be able to sell anywhere near as much. And it's this very strange world now where you've got big tobacco saying, oh, don't do this, it'll be horrible, more people are going to buy our stuff. I mean, this is a really bizarre argument for a business to be making. And the argument that they're going to, I mean, even that the measure will just cut prices and that will flood the market. Well, no, because the government has a very easy lever on that. And they say, well, we'll just increase excise until the price is too high. And so, it's a win-win. It takes care of the budget deficit issue. I just think Big Tobacco's on a hiding to nothing here. They're losing the public relations war. They're just trying really now to reach for any stick they can find, and they don't really have an effective one. Even the legal one, which we may talk about later, I don't think it's going to be effective at all. So these are the acts of an industry really in its death throes, I think.
Chris Berg in Melbourne will bring you in here. Are you hearing echoes of previous debates, the government being compromised, unintended consequences from a big program, and another very expensive anti-government advertising campaign? This is Pink Bats meets mining tax, isn't it?
I think every industry is going to follow the mining tax model, whether it's successful or not. I'm not sure. As Waleed points out, there's enough evidence to suggest that plain packaging is modestly popular. What's actually quite interesting is that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that raising the excise is extremely unpopular with a lot of voters, and particularly ALP voters. But what I'm concerned about with some of the statements made today is not just that they're probably pretty counterproductive. It's that it distracts from the actual discussion about the efficacy of plain packaging as a public policy issue, and whether it's whether plain packaging does actually cut down smoking rates and smoking uptake, or whether it just removes some of the ways that tobacco companies can compete with each other. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing that debate raised as much as it should be.
Tom Switzer, if the tobacco industry, as it's threatening to do, cuts the price so that the current sort of $16 a packet suddenly becomes $8 a packet, they're prepared to take a bottom line hit for the time being, would the government be just